All right. Thank you very much, Jim, for being here on timforrest.com and on my YouTube channel. I'm so excited to share with the folks today regarding contract manufacturing. Jim, you used to own a contract manufacturing facility. Can you share with us how you got into contract manufacturing? I'm excited to ask you some questions about for brands to understand how to work with contract manufacturers for their food product.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to be here, Tim. Thanks. I got into it completely by accident, to be truthful. I started a small local brand in the Hudson Valley of New York State. And there was nowhere for you to make the product, working at a really not a great location, not a great kitchen. And this opportunity came up to open a much bigger kitchen. And in the kitchen we were in, there were other small entrepreneurs that also needed space. So we kind of all went together. I ended up being the co-packer, and I started a co-packing business. And the primary reason was so I could co-pack for my brand. But as the business grew, there was more and more co-packing involved. And that's how I kind of fell into it and started to become a co-packer.
So I have quite a bit of experience with co-packing. So from your perspective, how does co-packing work? If I'm a brand and I need additional volume, I just call someone on the telephone. Hey, will you make me 10,000 cases of my cookies? How does that work?
Yeah, that's probably not the way to do it. But I got to, being in New York and having a lot of people reach out, right? If you have a co-packer shingle out there, you're going to get everybody who's doing their grandma's cookie, right? This is the best cookie. Everyone tells me it's the best cookie. I want to now make it. And they'll call up a co-packer and say, can you give me a price on the cookie? And that's probably the question they want answered the most, but it's not the first question you should ask. And through my experience with that, I've kind of developed like a co-packer pitch. Just like you're pitching for raising money, or you're trying to pitch, Whole Foods or whatever, you have to pitch co-pack, especially in this environment. Co-packers have heard it all. They're like your product being great and all your neighbors loving it and you're selling at the farm market, or you just got into Whole Foods, they've heard it 100 times over. So the co-packing pitch for me is just really doing your homework. First of all, you got to know your product. I mean, what goes in it? What requirements does your product need? What's your supply chain? Do you have an understanding of your costs or your cost of goods? Know your product. You don't want to walk into a co-packer and not know your product. The other thing is know the co-packer. Like, what's their specialty? Just look at what they do. Like, if they're a bakery, don't ask them to make your pickles, right? It's really important to understand what the co-packer can do and can't do. And most of them, if they're good, they'll have some information on your website. So do a little homework. Understand when you're going in there. And co-packers don't want to do it. They don't make money on test runs. They want to be able to get a client that's going to be long-term for them and has a good plan and has funding and understands where they want to be as a client. So those type of things are like the very early stage, what you should do. Know your product, understand the co-packer, and when you go talk with them, be prepared. And that's, for me, that's the beginning steps of it.
The best brands you worked with, Jim, what would they do after that part, as far as that initial conversation and beginning to engage and for you to work with them? What did it look like to work with the best brands in a co-manufacturing environment?
Well, the best brands, and because you've seen so many, it was pretty quick. You knew they knew their own product and they knew where they wanted to go as a company. So they knew the product, and our goal is 1 million sales, 2 million sales, whatever it was. Even if it's just farm market, that's fine too. But they knew their goals. And then they're able to, any information we ask for them, they're getting it to us so we can see it. Those type of companies, you could tell pretty quickly. But then you could also tell when they came to visit, right? They would come and visit, you would sit down. The first question wasn't, what are you going to charge me, right? They wanted to know a little bit about what's going on. And this is what I recommend to people when they go to visit, and definitely go to visit. Walk around, right? See what the employees look like. Meet the QA person. Have you seen a QA person on the floor? Look for piles, right? Anytime there's a pile of product, that's probably not a good thing. It means they're inefficient. Does the facility look clean? Is the bathroom clean? Like, those are the type of things you want to look at as you're evaluating a co-packer, because those are important things. Because it's not rocket science how they price you, right? They have to be efficient and they have to have low overhead. So if you can see that they look efficient and the building looks like in good shape, there's not piles and there's efficient, they have room to give you better pricing.
That's awesome. What about pro formas or projections on case needs? What does that look like from the best? How do they present that? And do they provide you quarterly, a year plan? What does that look like from the best brands?
We worked with a lot of, startups in that. So when they started to kind of graduate to understanding their business even more, we would look for those projections, right? A co-packer has so many hours that they're trying to fill. So if you can say to them, I need X amount of production, this far going out, you're filling a space for them that they need to fill. And that's valuable to them. So if you have someone coming in and say, we're going to need, 2 days of production every 3 weeks or whatever the number is, right? That's significant value to them because they have this big calendar, right? 12 months, a lot of slots they need to fill. And if you start filling it for them, that's value. So when a client came to me and had that information, I'm like, great, I have my production schedule. This person is going to do it X and Y. They're filling it in. They're organized. I trust that they can get me the product if I'm not buying it for them, right? Is the client going to be a headache or not? So that being organized is super important. And when clients knew when they needed production, and listen, that always changes, right? Hopefully it does because you're growing more. But if they had some real foresight and ability to predict things out, I considered that very valuable as a co-packer.
When I work, specifications are so important for my clients and for co-packing relationships. Can you share some feedback on the importance of specifications in working with brands on ingredients and packaging, et cetera?
So for us, it was really about communication on specs. So if we called up a client and said, listen, something just arrived, we don't like it, we don't want to bring it in, and we would talk, Zoom, show it what it looked like. We kind of let the client look at it to a degree. If it was somewhat, we were trying to fill it, not that if it was a bad product, but just didn't quite meet specs, because sometimes the client needed it and they were willing to bend their specs a little bit because they had an order coming in. But I never wanted us to take those chances, right? I wanted my person receiving to have the specs and understand, and they would come in and we would look at it. It's a little off spec. Okay, so we can reject it. We could easily reject it, but then that might hurt the client even more. So a lot of times it would be a conversation, hey, the green beans are a little small, or the cucumber's not exactly, what do you want to do here? Do you want us just to reject this product fully, which we will certainly do if it's not meeting specs? But that communication part was really, really important for us. And that's how we would pretty much try to deal with it in terms of specs.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Jim. Do you have any other tips or feedback for folks that are looking at a co-packing relationship for their brand, for their food product?
Well, I think I did talk about, visiting and looking at them and seeing it. You're trying to build a relationship, a long-term relationship. You have to look at it. So when you're stepping in and if you're being really super aggressive on pricing or something like that, that can be not a great way to approach it. You have to think of it as really a partnership. Co-packers are trying to make money. They're trying to do a business. They're not going to, one of the big things, especially with the beginning companies, they think the co-packer is just going to make it cheaper than them. And a lot of times they don't understand what they're actually putting into, especially if they're not paying themselves, if they have a shared kitchen, right? And all of a sudden they're like, wait, the co-packer is not that much cheaper. And they probably won't be in the beginning stages of it. But you really have to look at it as a long-term relationship. That's the best way to build upon it. And working with a co-packer, a good co-packer knows you need to be in business. So they will most of the time work with you. So I think that's that mindset of, I want to build a relationship here long-term is, I think, an important mindset to go into.
Awesome. This has been brilliant, Jim. If people want to reach out to you at Farmhouse Consulting, I know you're on LinkedIn. Would you like to share an email, or do you want to have them come through LinkedIn, or what would be best?
LinkedIn's probably the best. It's Jim. My email is Jim Hyland, HYLAND FHC @gmail.com. So
okay, great. Thank you so much for being here today. This was fantastic. I appreciate all the insights on co-packing.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.